I know a lot of us spend a lot of time talking in our communities about the importance of education. A lot of us have children in our education system. Some of us even have spouses who dedicate themselves to this profession. And I lay all that out because we know that's important, but I also lay that out because I know that we have to, not just do things or say things, we have to act. And one of the very first things we did in this body together, when we arrived in session, is we took a vote to raise our own budgets. We pretty much unanimously took a vote to raise our budgets, and the constant talk was we cannot afford to pay for our staff. We cannot afford to pay them with the budgets that we have. Inflation is an issue. Cost of living is an issue. Housing costs, price of eggs, $6 a dozen. And so we took a vote, a hard one, to raise taxpayer dollars for ourselves. And I know that we don't want to go home and say that it was okay for us and not okay for anyone else. And so this amendment does a couple of things, and let me tell you what it doesn't do. If you're worried about being anti-property tax cuts, understand this. Democrats pay property taxes. Republicans pay property taxes. We have constituents that pay property taxes. There's bipartisan support for property tax cuts. What we don't have is a property tax cut law. We do not have a law today that's going to cut property taxes beyond the first $5 billion that's already in the budget. This amendment will reduce the general revenue for some future tax cut that we don't know if we're going to get. And I'll be honest with you, we don't know if we're going to get it because we have a split view in both chambers. We have a Senate that wants to cut taxes one way. The House wants to cut it an entirely different way. And we're going to be at loggerheads, and the word is that nobody's going to give in, so we may not need $12 billion to be sitting around for a property tax transfer because we may not have a bill. But here's what we do have. We do have a current commitment to our teachers. We do have a teacher pay scale. We do have teachers in the profession that cannot afford to teach anymore. And we have generational wealth in our budget coffers. So what this vote does in effect is this vote says we're going to have a strong vote today to emphasize that on Article 3 spending, we have not done all of our homework when it comes to our teachers. I said this last night in Democratic caucus in the presence of Dr. Bonin. There are a lot of good things in this budget in the first 10 articles, and there's no denying that. But for me, in Article 3, it doesn't pencil when I look at the money that's going in and I look at where it's going. I don't see us increasing our amounts to public education. And if this amendment's not acceptable, we can get into the Q&A from the back mic and talk about that. But if we send a strong signal that we really care about Article 3, not just the money that we put in the schools and the textbooks and in the classrooms, but for our teachers, for our counselors, for our librarians, if we acknowledge that we have not raised their salaries since 2019, two things have happened since 2019. We had COVID, and we had the increased cost and responsibilities and demands on our professional educators and professional staff to adjust to that, putting them in a pretty, health and safety situation. And we also have had record high inflation that we have already decided is a problem for us when it comes to paying our staffs. Well, the inflation obviously exists outside this Capitol. Federal Reserve said last week that it has not gone away. Interest rates will continue to go up. So if you follow the markets, this issue has not been solved. And if you look at what we're paying our teachers relative to what the cost is for our inflationary cost, we were paying them less than what we thought we were paying them in 19. So I'm not asking you to take this vote to choose Peter or to choose Paul. I'm asking you to take this vote to send a strong message in the House that we give a darn about public education. we give a darn about our teachers, our counselors, our librarians, our nurses, and that we hope that as this process moves, and as the King bill moves, and as the Chair Buckley bill moves on school finance and curriculum and all the changes, that when we start doling out the money, that somebody is going to give teachers a pay raise, and $10,000 should be a good start. And so that, Mr. Speaker and members, that's what this amendment does. Don't let anyone tell you that we are robbing the fund. We are still sending $8 billion. We are still sending $8 billion to the Property Tax Relief Fund. And most importantly, also understand, I will take this amendment down. I will take this amendment down if you can show me somewhere else in this budget where we can find $4 billion that isn't spoken for. Every single big ticket item we're going to do this session, from property tax cuts, TRS pensions, broadband, higher education endowment, you name it, if it's got a B next to it, we are going to spend it outside this budget. We are not going to be able to take and put. We're going to send it to the voters. If 100 folks in the House vote for it and 2/3 vote for it in the Senate and the governor signs it, we will spend that money if the voters approve it, and it'll be dedicated to by the Constitution outside the spending cap. So if somebody wants to show me where $4 billion is lying around in TCEQ or, State Preservation Board or General Land Office, well, we can go there, but you're not going to find it. This is the only place in the budget where you can find $4 billion to support our teachers, but at the same time, let money move down the legislative process for property tax relief, something that both Democrats and Republicans support. This is a win-win. We send a message. We care about schools. We care about teachers. We also care about the work we're doing on tax cuts, and let both these things go forward. We're not under any illusions. Senate has their own ideas. This may not be it. And we also have conferees, ultimately, that may have different ideas. But if there is not a record vote in the House to show where we stand for this, then it's very easy to say that it's not a priority. So no gotchas here. This is just honest governance. This is just show me your values. Do you care about teachers? Show me your values. Do you care about raising their budgets like we cared about raising our budgets? And I hope this amendment is acceptable to the author.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Ashby, for what purpose?
Would the gentleman yield for a question or two?
Gentleman yield for questions?
Happy to yield.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Representative Martinez-Fisher. And you and I, and I appreciate your layout of this amendment. I think you and I will agree on a lot of what you just said. I know I certainly do, and I think most members of this body agree with what we are striving for here to find that balance, I think, that you were referring to between property tax relief that all of us want to go home and provide our taxpayers, but at the same time provide that much needed pay increase for our teachers. And so with that in mind, and thinking about what you just said in your layout, I guess, to be fair with what's in the base budget, and you referred to some of this information, but we are in agreement there is an additional new $5 billion for public education in House Bill 1.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you referenced a couple of bills that this body will be considering here in the next couple, 3 weeks, probably. Representative Chairman Dutton's, Chairman King's bill. And I think as it pertains to increasing our teacher salaries, which is a priority for this Texas House, that we talk a little bit about that. And so my question is, and you may be aware of this, but did you know that in one of those bills that we are requiring the districts that with the new money that they spend a minimum of 50% of the money on teacher pay raises?
Yes, sir, I do. My only concern with that is that the money that we have allocated thus far sort of amounts to about $50 increase in the basic allotment. We know schools need closer to 1,000. So I think if I'm a superintendent in my district or a superintendent in your district and you get sent an extra $50 per student, the needs are maybe need another $950 more. All I'm saying, sir, is that you are right, and we can work on that and we can improve that. But if we don't have a basis of understanding that the want and the need is much bigger than the status quo, You're a leader in this house, no doubt about it. I can pull this thing down for a half an hour if there is another way. We want to say today, when we're doling out the dough, that we haven't forgotten about teachers, because we know about the morass of legislation, and I know Chair King's working really hard. I know he tried to get a sub out this morning and wasn't ready, and we know the runs aren't ready, so we don't know what it does. I hear it's going to be dynamic from what he tells people, but we don't know that yet. But we're here right now. I can't do this tomorrow because we're going to do it today.
Right.
But if you think you've got some ideas, you want 30, 40 an hour to talk about it, I can postpone this for an hour and we can talk about it if that's what you're suggesting.
Well, I appreciate that, my dear friend. What I would say is, and I think we all want to go on the record here, I mean, we're all going to support our public teachers this session in a variety of different ways, more than what you and I are talking about this morning. But I think the other thing, talking about the property tax relief that's built into both this bill as well as House Bill 2, that's something that you alluded to. We all want to go home. Republicans, Democrats, teachers pay property taxes. We all want property tax relief, and I think there's unanimous agreement on that. But I think there is and I'm only going to speak for myself, but there's a little bit of concern, I think, when I look at your amendment, recognizing what you're trying to do. One of the things I get excited about when I listen to Chairman Bonin and Chairman Vandever talk about the increased funding is, for the first time, I guess I should say, maybe ask a question here. Did you know, and this will be the first time in over 2 decades, that we have increased state funding to over 50% by buying down these property taxes?
Yes, sir, and that is a very good question, and I'm really glad you asked it, and I really hope everybody's listening to our conversation. We've made an increase in funding to public education. The state has stepped up to do its share for 50% for the first time. You and I are just a couple of regular guys, but you can also get to 50% by spending less, right? You could spend less and get to 50% of the bill, or you could spend more to get to 50% of the bill. But I'm sure you know that when you look at the biennial change for the next 2 years on this budget, we're going to spend $11.3 billion. Okay, we're going to spend $11.3 billion for the next 2 years. But when you minus the $12 billion in property tax cuts, the TEA is going to get $700 million less for the next 2 years than we've given them in the last 2 years. So if we're making these really big investments, we appropriated a sum certain to the TEA 2 years ago, and by this budget as it stands right now, if we do it this way, TEA is getting $700 million less, all funds, and that's why I think we need to talk about that, because all funds means money for charter schools. All funds mean grants and other programs. We're not talking about the foundation school program, and we know this. We know this even by just looking at Chairman King's bill. Enrollment is up. There's been this sort of...
Gentleman's time's expired.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I hope the amendment's acceptable to the author.
The chair recognizes Mr. King of Hemphill to speak against the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I wasn't actually going to speak against this amendment. I was going to speak against a future one. But since House Bill 100 is a bill that I've authored and is going to be coming before this body soon, and that seems to be the topic of discussion for Representative Martinez-Fisher's amendment, I thought I'd just clear up a few things. We are going to increase the basic allotment, and it's not going to be by $50. It's going to be by $140 over the biennium. The most important part of the basic allotment, the third year, is going to implement an average inflationary increase every year, where we're not before this body every session talking about the basic allotment. And then it also moves the amount of money going to teacher compensation from 30%, which is current law, to 50%. So we are doing a tremendous amount on teacher pay. The next thing I would say, House Bill 100 will also include a change to the minimum salary schedule. And the first raise in the minimum salary schedule will cause an automatic pay increase to over 70,000 teachers in the state of Texas. The second year of the biennium, when we raise the minimum salary schedule again, it's going to pick up considerably more. It would be an average raise of almost $4,000 a year just from the first increase. So while I appreciate what Representative Martinez Fisher is attempting to do here, we're working diligently to take care of our teachers in a number of bills. There are billions and billions of dollars out there that are coming into public education in one way or another, and while teachers are vital and certainly my top priority, there are other programs, there are other things that need to be funded, and certainly we need to be taking care of our kids. And we've got billions of dollars looking at school safety amongst many other issues. So I would urge you to vote no on this amendment. I would urge you, as we go forward, to support,
Mr. Martinez Fisher, for our purpose.
support the ideas, and let's have the debate and put these dollars on the bills where they belong, and let's don't try to create law in the base budget.
The gentleman yield
Thank
for
you.
questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chair King. Chair King, so thank you for explaining your substitute. I know we haven't seen it. We look forward to it. So what is the teacher pay raise that you anticipate for FY24 and for FY25?
Well, I think it varies because the minimum salary schedule is going to automatically raise the teachers I'd mentioned. 70,903 teachers would receive an automatic pay raise of $3,855 annually, but that doesn't have anything to do with the 50% of the new money in the basic allotment that we're going to require.
Yes, sir. And so but the amendment that's on the floor is a teacher pay raise of $10,000, and you're saying in House Bill 100 the teacher pay raise just is on average $38.55. Is that what?
Only for the ones that would be below the new minimum salary schedule.
I'm sorry, Chairman. Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Martinez Fisher.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble hearing Chair King. If I can get some order, please.
Members, please take your conversation outside the rail.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that last response. We were talking about the pay raise.
So I don't want to confuse teacher pay raises that would be the money coming out of the basic allotment or what the legislation would require school districts to do with new money in the basic allotment. My point is, when we raise the minimum salary schedule, it's going to, the first time we raise it, the first year of the biennium, it's going to cause a pay raise automatically to 70,903 teachers on average of $3,855 a year. That is not. Now, the other teachers that are above that, but that's what we're going to do for the ones at the bottom first. And then school districts, we're going to be required to put 50% of the new money we give them into salaries.
And that new money, Mr. Chairman, you said what is the basic allotment you anticipate?
I anticipate for the for the biennium, it'll be $140 additional. And then the third year, what the bill would actually call for is an average inflation over the last 10 years calculation for an annual adjust to the basic allotment, where we're not having this conversation every session.
Yes, sir. And so if today's CPI numbers suggest that the basic allotment raise would be $1,000, the current proposition is $140 and not $1,000?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I guess the inflation experts, the folks that track it, and you look at the cost for schools per pupil, that to get the basic allotment in line with inflation, the basic allotment would need to be raised by $1,000. You want to raise it only by $140? Is that?
I want to raise it $70 a year in this next biennium, and in the third year it would be adjusted for the average inflation. And if you take what inflation's done the last 2 years, that would be a substantial raise. I don't have those calculations all in front of me, but I think you understand where it's going.
Well, maybe just to get you on the record, do you believe we should be funding our schools at inflation?
I think definitely we need to fund our schools to make up for the inflationary losses of the last several years.
Well, losses is one thing, but if the metrics show that this is the dollar amount per pupil for basic allotment, that will cover the schools to cover their inflationary costs. You support that?
I support everything we have done in 19 and 21, and what I support is making up for the gains we've lost and then continuing to build off that. We should have never had the losses we've had the last 4 years, but nobody saw that coming.
Yes, sir.
And I think what we're trying to do, Representative, at this time is we're trying to make up for those losses and plan for the future while we have the money to do so.
And I appreciate you wanting to make up for the losses, and I know you know this because you know your material, but the losses now take us back to 2013. So if we're looking at how we're treating schools right now, we're treating them at 2013 levels. In 2019, when we bumped the basic allotment up by like $1,600, we were high-fiving everybody on this floor. We had cups that talked about education now. 2019's come and go, and now we need $1,000 per pupil. And so we just need a commitment, and that's sort of been my ask this entire process is just give me the commitment we're going to do this. We don't have to take this vote.
Yeah.
So just give me the commitment that we'll fund it at inflation.
Well, my commitment is to get back not only to what we did in House Bill 3 in 2019, but to move beyond that. And I think that's what House Bill 100 will do. I'll be glad to talk to you. You can come talk to me about 100 if you'd like. But I think having your amendment in this in the base budget is not the right place for it. I think it needs to be in a bill, and it needs to be a policy decision.
Well, and I know you know that your bill is in the budget, right? I mean, your bill is very prominent in the budget, so it's kind of we're there. But
no, sir, I would disagree with that because my bill is enabling legislation that the body needs to debate and vote on. The money is appropriated, but if House Bill 100 doesn't pass this floor, the money's not there.
We have a contingent rider for your legislation. And so, look, I'm old school guy. Simple. You make a commitment right now that we'll fund schools at inflation, I'll sit down and we get one page further down this bill so we can go home. So you just tell me, Rep, we will fund schools at inflation, I'll sit down and withdraw.
Now, I would tell you just almost anything to get you to sit down, but I'm sorry, that was wrong.
Come on, man, come on.
I apologize,
Bring
Mr.
it.
Speaker.
Stand up,
no,
stand up and tell me that.
Seriously, I apologize. But what I would say is, I can't make that commitment on my own, and I appreciate what you're trying to do. I don't know. I will be glad to stand here and answer more of your questions, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, and I'm happy if you'd like to yield to Chair Van Dever so we could have some conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I yield.
The chair recognizes Mr. Van Dever in opposition to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, let me clarify a couple of things. Number one, if you vote against this amendment, there's no reason for you to feel that you're voting against our teachers, you're voting against public schools, you're voting against the educational system in Texas, because that is simply not true. The budget funds our public schools. Actually, this budget is an increase in all funds of 16.7%, which is above inflation. So I assume maybe you'll sit down since I've told you that we are funding at 16.7, which is considerably above inflation. I believe that we are making a commitment to our public schools, and there is more than just the BA as a method to fund public schools. As a former superintendent, there were a lot of ways we were funded in our local school system. One of the things that's in one of these bills that we've been talking about today is one of the things that my superintendents told me was a priority coming into this session was work to fund on enrollment instead of ADA. One of these bills will do that in the small and mid-sized school formula. Many of you have small and mid-sized schools in your district. this is huge for those schools.
Mr. Martinez Fisher, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I didn't know if the gentleman's time was expired. I was going to move to extend at the right time.
No, we're on to a new 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Just want to make a couple of more comments, and then I'll be happy to take your questions. I want to remind people that one of the things that we're doing in this bill, that you will do in this bill when you pass this budget, we are putting $875 million into ensuring that our teachers' premiums for their health care do not go above 5%. And without that, they're going to skyrocket. You know, there are ways to reward our teachers, to give our teachers income without necessarily doing it through salary. And I would also remind you that when we talk about taking money from property tax reduction to put it in teacher salary, I'd remind you that our teachers pay property taxes as well. And they're looking for some relief in their property taxes as well. Again, giving them an opportunity for a better level of income and a better life. And with that,
Mr. Speaker.
I will yield for questions.
Mr. Martinez Fisher, for what
Gentleman
purpose?
yield for some questions.
The gentleman yield for questions.
I'll yield.
The gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chair Van Dever, thank you for your remarks, and thank you for taking my questions. We pass each other on this floor every so often, and I tell you the same thing every time I see you. I say, I'll call you Gary, but I'll say here, Chairman Van Dever,
Yep.
I'm going to find you some more money for Article 3. I keep telling you that. And I tell you when I find that money that I trust you as a former superintendent and you know how to spend it. But I believe in just simple math. And you can fund Article 3 at whatever number you have mentioned, and it can be at an amount above inflation. But is it true that of the money we appropriate, we intend to move more than $12 billion into the property tax relief fund? Is that true or not?
That's true.
Okay, so we know that while we're increasing this funding and we're telling people it's okay to take this vote because we're putting record amounts of money, we also have to tell them, but please know that that's not going to the classroom. You admit that right now?
That
The $12 billion that goes to the property tax relief fund will not be in the classroom.
Sure.
It will not be in a school bus. It
Sure.
will not be in the cafeteria.
Right.
Okay, so just so that we're clear, we can't go home saying we took this monster vote for pub ed, knowing full well that $12 billion, and I'll say that when you look at the biennial change for the budget for 2024 and 2025 is what we're doing, that biennial change was another $11.3 billion, and I'm referring to figure 29 of Article 3, Education by Agency, as produced by the LBB. Is that true? Is the LBB telling the truth there?
I would assume LBB would be telling the truth.
And if they are telling the truth and you're looking at all funds, even though we say we're spending record amount of money in public schools in Article 3, these numbers suggest that when you take out the $12 billion that you and I just agreed to that will never make it to the classroom, the TEA is getting $700 million less for the next 2 years than we gave them the last 2 years. So my question to you is, how are we improving things for public schools when we're giving them $700 million less at a time when inflation is much worse today than it was in 2022?
So I guess I need a little clarification here. Are we talking about funding our public schools, or are we talking about funding TEA?
Well, I'm talking about funding all schools, and since charter schools are not funded by Foundation School Program, we have to talk about all funds. And because certain grants aren't funded in the Foundation School Program, those fund schools, so we've got to be apples to apples. Okay, so this isn't federal money. This is all funds. And again, I'll spot you another fact is that this also takes into account that public school enrollment is up. It's not flat and it's not down. It is up, just like it's indicated in House Bill 100. So my question again, I mean, it's a lot of talk here. My question again is, if we are doing more for schools for the next 2 years and more for education for the next 2 years, how is it that we're funding the TEA with $700 million less for tomorrow than we did yesterday?
Well, I don't have those numbers in front of me, and I can't speak to that. But I can speak to the fact that over the past, 3 bienniums. We've increased funding 13.3% in 2021, with ESSER included 28% in 22-23, and then in 24-25, current biennium, or biennium going forward, we're projected 16.7%. That's significant. That's significantly higher than inflation. And again, you talk about BA, you talk about money going to TEA, but the reality is this bill puts at least $5 billion in our public schools.
Yes, sir.
And again, we're not looking to take that money and just distribute it. We have bills coming through. Our Pub Ed committee is working very hard to look at what's best for our public schools and then give us the path forward.
Yes, sir. And again, I mean, math doesn't lie.
Sure.
And we can take the ESSER funds out. We can have this conversation with no federal funds. And in 2022 and 2023, we have $54 billion for education. We are currently debating a budget today for the next 2 years without the federal funding at $50.7 billion. So my question is, if we're doing all these fantastic things and we're not going to rely on the federal money going forward, we are going to be appropriating $3.3 billion less of funds without federal funds for the next 2 years than we did the last 2 years. And so that just doesn't pencil for me, and I'm trying to understand that, and maybe you can help me understand it, how we're making progress with less money.
I'll be honest with you, I don't believe we are funding at a lower level.
Okay.
That I don't believe what the data you just gave, I don't believe that's accurate data.
Okay. So at least we can agree on the all funds number. We don't agree on ESSER, that's fine. We don't have to. The all funds is what it is. And so, again, my commitment is with the $5 billion in new funds, no matter where you place it or how you place it, can teachers get a $10,000 pay raise with that money?
I don't know that a $10,000 pay raise, I don't remember that ever being necessarily the goal.
Okay. Well, it's certainly the goal of this amendment. It's definitely the goal of those who will support this amendment. And I think I just want people to know that if they say, I'm not going to vote for this because I heard Chairman Van Dever and he said, with the $5 billion we have out there, we can get to a $10,000 pay raise. And I mean, again, I'm a simple person. If that's a commitment you want to make, we can withdraw.
No, again, you're the one that threw out the $10,000 pay raise, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. And again, I don't know that that's a decision we want to make in this budget. We have a very able public education committee that's going to look at bills that are coming through. Many of them have teacher pay raises in them, and we'll have a robust debate on that here on the floor.
Gentlemen's time's expired. Does any member wish to speak for, against, or on the bill amendment? Members, Ms. Gonzalez of El Paso has lost her BlackBerry. It's not exactly a rotary phone, but it's just one step higher than a rotary phone. So if you see a dinosaur walking around the house floor, please return it to Ms. Gonzalez. Mr. Leach, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
Please state your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, what is a blackberry?
There are two blackberries that I'm aware of. One is a fruit, and one is a phone that Mary Gonzalez has. Mr. Kane, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, does Representative Leach know where Connie, Anita, or Holden are?
The chair is not advised.
Oh, thank you.
The chair recognizes Mr. Martinez Fisher to close on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, we've heard the debate. It's a very simple choice. We can make a statement for our teachers. We can leave money in the kitty for property tax cuts. We can trust our appropriators to go to the next phase, understanding that this House, this body has made a statement that it's not either or, it is both. We can do both. And we have the capacity to do this. And we can do this a number of ways. We can come back with language that says we're going to fund this raise if the voters approve it. Outside the cap, we can do it just like property taxes. If it's okay to spend $15 billion to do a property tax cut and say, voters, we'll cut taxes if you approve it, we can say, voters, we can spend $4 billion for teacher pay raises if you approve it. And that's all this amendment does. We can disagree over the math. We can disagree over whether, when you take $12 billion out of Article 3 because it doesn't go to the classroom, is that an education spend or not? You all are smart enough, and your constituents are smart enough to know that if you're putting $1 in Article 3 to cut taxes, it's not going into the cafeteria to help people eat. It's not going to the library to buy books, or maybe for some of you, take books out. It's not going to the school classroom. It's going to cut taxes. We're not going to graduate kids and have them have their best marks by cutting taxes. So this amendment, if we're going to stay to this amendment says there's $12 billion, almost $13 billion that we're about to transfer from general revenue to property tax relief. Before we send it away, send it to a place where we can never get it back, let's just carve out 4%. Let's just do a little bit more. Excuse me, not 4%. Let's carve out $4 billion and say we respect our teachers.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Ashby, for what purpose?
will the gentleman yield for
The
a
gentleman
question?
yield for a question.
Yes, sir, I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you to my friend from San Antonio for yielding. And Representative Martinez Fisher, I think that we evidently have a difference of numbers here from LBB, and I just wanted to clarify the numbers that we have in front of us. It was handed to me by Chairman Bonin. So to be clear, we are increasing our general revenue and all funds for public education in this budget to $70.4 billion, which is a 22.3% increase, and increasing our recapture funds in addition to that by $5.2 billion. So while I know that you have a sheet of numbers there that draw a little bit different picture, I just want to be clear that this is the facts, that what I just laid out as far as what we have from LBB as far as what we are investing in Article 3 in our public schools.
And being fair to you, because I respect you, I haven't seen your numbers. We talked about it here. What we disagreed on, you and I, was that we're going to double dip on that $12 billion, that it does count for school funding. Buying down property taxes is not school funding. Buying down property taxes is property taxes. I cannot educate my constituents on property tax cuts, the ones that are sitting in the classroom. And so we acknowledge that the chart I offered you and Chair Bonin to take with you is the chart from the LBB. I'm using their math. If you don't want to use my math about stripping out the ESSER funds, well, that's just something that we know how to do because we can count. Let's just take the all funds number, and we're putting about as much money in as we're taking out for property tax relief. So I guess the fundamental question, or I'm not going to ask you a question, I know better, but the fundamental issue is when we vote right now, are we taking a vote to say that property tax cuts is education funding? That's all I'm saying. Because what I'm saying is before we send that money away, this is $1 that will darn sure go in the classroom. As a matter of fact, it'll go to one of the two most important people in the classroom, and that's the person providing the instruction for the children that are taking the instruction. And I can't think of a higher and better use for Article $3, not your precious broadband money that you have down the road. This is precious Article $3. I'm also happy to take an amendment to this amendment. If we care about tax cuts more than we care about teacher pay raises in education, let's put this in a different article. Don't let me go home to my constituents. Don't let Lozano or Thompson or Anderson, don't let them go home to their constituents and say, oh man, we put $12 billion into schools. We killed it. Incidentally, we're going to let it out. Property tax cuts. We hope we're doing our best. Property tax cuts aren't in the Texas Constitution. That's not our duty. Our duty is the schools. And so that's just where we're at. I mean, this is a vote. This is a process vote. If we make a statement, sir, we're telling folks that we care about both, not just one. I could have swept the whole $12 billion. There's a lot of need in education. I gave you most of it. I gave you $8 billion. I'm just asking for $4 billion for teachers, and I want your consideration.
Thank you, Representative. I just want to be clear with the facts here that this is a historic amount of funding we're putting into public education. And while I understand that we have a difference of opinion in terms of prioritizing tax cuts to buy down local property taxes as it pertains to M&O for school districts, I know you and I have, and everyone on this floor has wanted to get to this day that's in this budget where the state's share of funding is 50% or greater for our public schools. And what I'm saying is we're doing both. We're taking care of our public teachers and we're providing the tax cuts that our taxpayers are demanding. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate that. And I just want you to know that even though we're friends, if your $5 billion broadband bill was in this budget, I'd be taking the money from there.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Patterson, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for some questions?
The gentleman yield for questions.
Yes, sir.
The gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez-Fisher. Earlier this session, there was a press conference that I believe every member of your caucus likely attended, talking about a $15,000 pay raise for teachers. And I noticed that your amendment has a $10,000 pay raise for teachers. Are you saying that teachers aren't worth that extra $5,000 that y'all were in this room just 2 months ago talking about?
No, sir. We did that on purpose for you. So this is your opportunity to bring an amendment to the amendment. You want to join me? 15,000? Let's do it. I'll put my signature down if you put yours down.
Would you do 30,000 for teachers?
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah. Would you do 30,000?
You want to be a big boy? Let's do it. I'll delay.
Would you do 30,000 for teachers?
How much time do you need?
Would you do 30,000 for teachers?
Hey, are you going to sign it?
For 40,000?
Are you going to sign it? Cheap seats, man. Come on. Let's go.
No, we'll just vote it down. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you for not caring about teachers.
He impugned your motive. Call him to order.
What?
Whoa.
The question occurs on the adoption of the amendment. A record vote has been requested by Ms. Isaac. A record vote has been granted. The clerk ring the bell. So Mr. Van Diemen voting nay. Dr. Bonham voting nay. Mr. King of Hempel voting nay. Mr. Jones of Dallas voting aye. So Mr. Jatan voting nay. So Mr. Hunter voting nay. Of all members voted. Mr. Harrison voting nay. Of all members voted. There means 66 ayes and 79 nays. The amendment fails to adopt.